We're going to resume with lesson 6. So we've gotten our delete functionality working. We've added edit links so that we can actually load a game. We should probably make sure if we're going to add a game that our page still loads, which it does. But we need to be able to select the right publisher. So we're going to need a little bit of logic inside of our loop on game details. So we're just going to, inside this for each loop, we're going to add a little if statement. So if something else, and I'm going to move the echo statement that we currently have, we're going to move that inside the else. So this is in the event that the current publisher does not match the publisher of the game. Our if condition is going to be this: if our game publisher ID is equal to the current publisher ID, then we want to select that option. So the easiest way to do this, I'm actually going to copy line 90 because it's almost the same. I'll paste it up here. I'm just going to add one thing. In this case, we're going to add the word, the attribute selected. So when the current publisher matches the publisher of this game, we want that option to be selected. Otherwise, we just add a new option. So if we try the page like this now, rather than the drop-down always defaulting to the first publisher, depending on which game we pick, we should get a different option being selected in the drop-down list. So I'm going to go through these one at a time. If I click NHL, it says Activision. Some of these don't have publishers. That's why, I think. Let's see. Okay. Maybe I need to test this. Let me make a new game. So I'll go here with no ID, new game, 1E, and I'll choose EA and save. When I go to edit, it now shows EA. I think the issue is the games we have in here, they don't have any publishers yet. I'll be able to go back and edit these shortly and change the publisher. I'll make one more. Another game. And I'll pick Bethesda. So now when I go to edit it, Bethesda's selected. When I edit this game, the right publisher is selected. So we could actually try to edit now. So my NHL 2K21, it doesn't actually have any publisher. So I'm going to try changing it to EA. And I'm going to save. Says my game was saved. Okay. So what happened here? I got It saved as EA, but it created a new game down here. How come? So our drop-down list is working, but I tried editing this first game. How come when I edit it and tried selecting the right publisher, so if I go to Dark Souls, who's the publisher of Dark Souls? May as well pick the right one. Thank you. So, yeah, what's going on here? So when I edit this one, it still says Activision, but now I get a duplicate. This one's right. How come this duplicate happened? Why didn't it edit? How come it created a new record for the same game? Go in and edit my Madden game, pick the publisher, save, go back. So now I've got all these duplicates here. How come? And delete some of them. Why are the games being copied rather than updated? Any ideas? Take a look at your save game page. Remember, that's the page that's processing our form posts. Here's save game. Well, let's go and look at our save game page. We had a brief look at it before the break, right? The code here is saying insert. So even if our form is letting us modify a game, the SQL command on our save page, it runs insert every time. There's no code here to update an existing game. It just inserts a new one. So we need to make a couple of changes to fix this. We're going to go back to our game details form. There's one important thing we need to add here, one more thing in our form. I'm just going to put it right down here at the bottom. We also need to now pass in the ID so that we can use this value on the save page to tell us if we're editing an existing game, we have an ID, or are we adding a new game because our game ID is empty. So here we're going to specify type equals hidden. The user doesn't need to see this field, but we need to include it in our form. So we're going to add this anywhere inside the form. Typically, we put hidden fields down near the bottom. So we don't actually see it. If I look up a game, you don't see the game ID, but in the page source, think it's just caching my file. So here we've got a hidden input, but the game ID shows up. So now we can use this game ID on our save page, and it's going to tell us if we're inserting or if we're updating. So make sure you add, I put it in the chat, this hidden input into the bottom of your form. And then we can use this on our save game page. So we'll open up save game. I'm going to scroll up to the top. And I'm now going to add a new variable that we get from the form post. So the game ID is embedded in the form, but it's hidden. The end users don't see it. We know it's there. So then we can use this to determine, are we adding or are we updating? So we're going to add a game ID variable up at the top of our save page. And then we can evaluate if this is empty or not later on. That's going to determine what our SQL looks like. So if no game ID, add new record. If game ID, update existing record. So we're going to move this into an if statement. If our game ID actually, you know what? We'll do it this way. I'm going to move this condition first. Sorry. It'll make a little more sense this way, I think. So if not empty, game ID, otherwise, we'll insert. So if we have a game ID, we don't want to do an insert. We need to run an update command instead. So different type of operation in the database. So in this case, we're going to update games. We'll set the title equal to our title parameter, our release year, not sure if you have used update commands yet in your relational database class or if this is new. And then we need a same where clause. Okay, use them once or twice. So if our ID isn't empty, we're going to do an update. If our ID is empty, we're going to do an insert instead. So now we have two different kinds of SQL commands, and we're using our ID value to indicate to us which kind of SQL query, which kind of SQL statement we should run. Insert for adding a new game, or update for editing an existing game that already has an ID. Now, in our insert, we had 4 parameters, right? 4 values we're giving to the SQL query: title, release year, rating, and publisher ID, which we're binding here on line 65 to 68. When we're updating, though, we now have 1 extra parameter. We now have a game ID parameter, so we need to add this parameter when we're updating. So we're going to say, again, if not empty, if our game ID isn't empty, we need to bind that parameter too. So we're only binding the 5th parameter when we already have an ID. When we're adding a new one, we don't have an ID yet. The database is going to generate that once we insert. So our save page, it now should be able to do both kinds of operations. It can add without an ID. It can update when there is an ID. We have these 4 parameters for both. We have the 5th parameter when we're editing, but not when we're adding. And then I think I'll add a redirect here. So we'll add our header location to take the user back to the games page. Rather than just printing a message on the screen, we'll just take them back to the table. So I'm going to try this out. I'll upload the code in a minute, but I'm going to try it out so that now if I go to edit something, it shouldn't give me another duplicate. So I go to edit Tetris. I pick a publisher and save. And now notice it didn't duplicate. And now when I click Tetris, my publisher is saved properly. So now I can delete some of these other duplicates I have. And who should the publisher be for Legend of Zelda? Anybody know? Nintendo, thank you. So I'll pick Nintendo. So now when I go to edit any of them, I've updated them all so the correct publisher shows up each time. I should also make sure I can still add, that we didn't break the add. So I'm going to go back in, add a new one. So I can still add, I can edit, and now we can read and delete. So we have a full CRUD application working. I'm going to do 2 other small things to this page. And then we're going to upload the code and stop. I want to add a link, a heading and a link, because right now there's no easy way for a user to add a new record. They have to manually go to the game details. So we want to give them a link here. And then Nafisa, you asked earlier in the class, can we show the publisher here as well? It's a little complex, but yeah, we can do it. So these things will just take us a few more minutes. And then I'll upload the full code. So I'm going to go back to games. And above all this PHP code, right inside the body, going to add two things. We're going to add an H1 that just says game, our games. And I'm going to add a link to game details that says add a new game. So now I can navigate from the main games page. We can go to the form. So I'm just adding this right inside the body, above all of the HTML, all the PHP code on this page. So now I get this heading, and I've got a link that I can add. So now I can add, I can edit, or I can delete. So we can navigate around here. So just a simple H1 and an anchor tag. So the last thing we'll do with this before I'll upload it is let's add the publishers here. In order to do this, we're going to need to modify our query. Have you written any queries in your database class that use multiple tables? Or are you not there yet? I'm assuming you haven't done that yet. You'll be doing it after reading week. Okay, I didn't think so. Well, I'll show you the syntax. So what we need to do is we need to connect the games and the publishers tables together. And in SQL, connecting two tables based on a common field is called a join. So I'll show you the syntax. So we're going to do select games.star, so all the columns from games, and publishers.name from games. And then we use this syntax to connect them. Inner join publishers on games, and this is where we link the two fields together. The game publisher ID is equal to the publishers so this will give us all the columns from the games table as well as the matching publisher name from the publishers table. Here's our query. So there's no limit to how many joins we can have. So we can connect every join links two tables. So if we want to link 10 tables in a query, we can have 9 joins where we connect the primary key from one table to the matching foreign key in the other table. So how do we display this? Well, maybe just so after our rating, let's add a after our, this should go after rating, before the actions. All right, we don't need a TD there. So there's our new heading. I've added one more column heading for publisher. And now we should be able to display the publisher name here in a new column. So after we display the rating column, we want to display the publisher name. So now it shows me each publisher because we've joined the tables together because they share that common publisher ID. Right? So when I go to edit, my publisher is selected properly each time. You'll do more work with Mazir in your database course on joins through the course. So you'll get more comfortable with them. Okay, I think that was everything we wanted to do today. I will upload everything to GitHub. I'm also happy to stick around in the WebEx room if you need a bit of help or you have any questions about today's lesson. If you don't, then I will see you before 11. Please be sure you're in the WebEx room before 11 next week. I will also make sure I have all your assignment ones marked and back to you before next week's exam. I pledge that I will get that done. Yeah, I'm going to upload everything right now. Nope, there's no lab, there's no quiz. You don't have to submit anything for next week, just prepare for your exam. And if you have questions, by all means, you can send them to me or book an office hours appointment on tomorrow morning or Tuesday morning. There's no homework, no assignments. You guys worked hard on assignment 1. Everybody got it in on time and submitted. So I don't want you to do anything else other than to prepare for the exam. Okay, so I've uploaded all of today's code. If you don't have questions, you're free to go. I'll see you next week. If you need a bit of help or have a question, I will stay in the WebEx room for a little while. Have a great week, everybody.